My stepdad kicked me out at 19, then my estranged dad called and exposed the affair that destroyed our family. I'm 19 now, and I've honestly been stuck in this situation way longer than I should have been. I've tried to deal with it on my own, but I'm at the point where I genuinely don't know what to do anymore. What makes it worse is that my mom always takes his side, no matter what. Everything started when I was 14. One morning, my dad just disappeared. No warning, no goodbye, just gone. My mom sat me down and told me he said he didn't want to be a father anymore, that he was done with us, like we were some failed experiment he could just walk away from. And I believed her, because honestly, what else could I think? When your dad vanishes without a trace, without so much as a goodbye, your brain grabs onto any explanation that makes even a little sense. For the first 2 weeks, my mom was a wreck. She cried nonstop, said things like, "How could he just abandon us like this?" and promised we'd get through it, just the two of us. I remember being furious with my dad. He broke her heart, and she didn't deserve that. I hated him for making her hurt like that. But then something changed. Suddenly, the tears stopped. It was like someone flipped a switch. She started dressing up again, going out more, getting her nails done, buying new outfits. She was always on her phone, smiling like a teenager texting her crush. It felt off. Shouldn't she still be sad? Shouldn't she still be processing that her husband just walked out on us? I asked her who she was always texting. She told me it was her sister, just trying to support her through the divorce. But that didn't add up. Her sister lived across the country, and they'd never really been that close. Something wasn't sitting right. Then, about a month after Dad left, this guy named Robert started coming around. My mom said he was a friend from work helping her sort out the legal stuff. He seemed polite enough at first. But he started showing up more and more, eating dinner with us, watching TV with us like he was already part of the family. It felt like he'd just slid right into place. Mom said he was just being supportive and that I should be thankful someone was stepping up to help during such a rough time. I didn't push it. I was already dealing with my own crap at school and trying to make sense of why my dad bailed. Then one night, my mom sat me down and told me that she and Robert had gotten close and that they'd developed feelings for each other. She explained that people sometimes connect during tough times and that Robert had brought some light back into her life. She said they were going to start officially dating and hoped I'd be okay with it because, after what my dad did, she deserved some happiness. I didn't know how to feel. It all seemed really fast. But I wanted her to be happy, so I said it was fine. 4 months after my dad left, almost to the day, my mom and Robert got married. She told me they didn't want to waste time because life is short, and when you find the right person, you go for it. Robert moved in immediately, and that's when everything really started shifting. He started sleeping in my dad's bed, sitting in his chair at the table, watching his shows, using his stuff. It was like someone hit replace on my life. Mom acted like everything was perfect. She was constantly giggling at his jokes, clinging to his arm, calling him pet names like they were in some rom-com. She kept saying how lucky she was to find someone who actually appreciated her. In the beginning, Robert was friendly toward me. He asked about my classes, offered help with homework, even took me to a baseball game once. My mom kept saying how amazing it was for me to finally have a positive male role model, unlike my useless dad, as she put it. But once he officially became my stepdad, Robert's whole attitude changed. Suddenly, he was laying down rules. He told me I needed to contribute more around the house, that I was old enough to handle responsibilities. He gave me chores I never had before. He set curfews, 9 p.m. on school nights, 10 on weekends. He said I had to ask before having friends over and keep my room spotless because a messy room shows no pride in your home. Mom didn't just agree with him, she praised him. She said my dad never taught me discipline, and Robert was just trying to fix that. When I pushed back, she told me I should be grateful that someone cared enough to set boundaries. But the more time went on, the more he started treating me like a burden. He'd complain if I ate too much, or said I was hogging the hot water. He nitpicked everything: if I left a light on, if I used the wrong sponge, if I asked for a new pair of jeans. He even started questioning my mom about why I needed anything at all. He'd always bring up how, when he was my age, he was already working and paying for his own stuff. He told me maybe I should get a job if I wanted extras. And of course, Mom stood by him, saying he was trying to teach me the value of money and responsibility. She said I was acting entitled and that I didn't appreciate how much Robert was doing for me. But to me, it felt like he was just looking for reasons to make me feel unwanted. I started spending more and more time at my friend Jake's place. His parents treated him like a person, not a problem. Then, the day I turned 18, Robert sat me down again. He said that now I was legally an adult, I needed to start paying rent or start figuring out where I was gonna go. He said most guys my age were either working full-time or in college, and it wasn't fair for me to freeload anymore. I told him I had plans. I wanted to go to community college, work part-time, but I needed time to save. He said I had until my 19th birthday to make a decision, pay up or move out. My mom was sitting right there the whole time, nodding along. She said Robert was being reasonable. She even told me that if it were up to her, she might have kicked me out already. Then she added, maybe this'll finally push you to stop coasting through life. I was stunned. I looked at her and said, this is my home too. I grew up here. I shouldn't have to pay rent just to exist in the house I was raised in. But Robert cut in and said it was their home now, and I was just a guest, one who'd long overstayed his welcome. That was it for me. I lost it. I told him he wasn't my dad and had no right to treat me like some unwanted guest. I said he was just a guy who moved in, took over everything, and now wanted to shove me out because I didn't fit into his perfect little setup. Robert snapped back, called me an ungrateful brat, said I had zero respect for authority, and then he crossed a line I'll never forget. He said maybe the reason my real dad left was because I was such a difficult kid. My mom broke down crying and started yelling at both of us to stop. She begged us to quit fighting, said she couldn't take the tension anymore. And then she turned to me and said I needed to apologize to Robert. That he was just trying to help me grow up and become independent. I told her no. I wasn't apologizing for anything. Because from where I was standing, Robert was the one who had been pushing and pushing until I finally snapped. Then my mom looked me dead in the eyes and said, if you can't respect my husband, maybe it really is time for you to move out. That hit me hard. I couldn't believe she was actually choosing him over me. Her own son. I called her out on it, but she shook her head and told me I had it all wrong. According to her, she wasn't choosing sides, she just couldn't have me constantly clashing with Robert and undermining him in their home. She said it was putting too much pressure on their marriage. She told me Robert had done nothing but try to support both of us, and he didn't deserve to be treated with disrespect in his own house. Then she said something I couldn't believe. She thought that maybe some space between us would actually help me realize how lucky I was. Now my 19th birthday is just 2 months away, and Robert won't stop bringing it up. He keeps making snide little remarks like, better start checking apartment listings, or, time to find some roommates. Meanwhile, my mom acts like this whole thing is completely normal. Like it's no big deal to kick your kid out as soon as they turn 19. I've got a part-time job, but let's be real, it barely covers gas and groceries. I'm not even close to being able to afford rent, bills, and everything else on top of that. And most of my friends? They've already left for college. I don't exactly have people lining up to split an apartment with me. Honestly, it just feels like I'm being forced out of my own life, out of my family. And what kills me is that my mom's going along with it like I don't even matter. Like Robert, some guy she married after 4 months, is more important than the kid she raised for almost 2 decades. I know I'm technically an adult now, but I'm still in my first year of community college. I'm trying to figure things out. I don't have a plan or a backup option. It's like Robert wants me gone so he can have my mom to himself, and no one's even pretending otherwise anymore. I've been wondering if I should try to talk to my mom again, just her, without Robert hovering. Maybe if I catch her alone, she'll actually listen. Or maybe I should stop hoping things will change and just start packing my stuff and deal with it. I love my mom. But ever since she married Robert, it's like she turned into someone else. Someone who doesn't really care what happens to me, as long as he's comfortable. Am I being unreasonable for thinking I should be able to stay here while I get on my feet? Or is Robert right? Do I need to be out because I'm 18 now? I really don't know anymore. It feels like I'm losing my home, and my family along with it. Update. A few weeks ago, I posted about how my stepdad Robert wanted me out of the house by my 19th birthday. A lot of people told me to try having a real, honest conversation with my mom when he wasn't around. So I decided to give that one last shot before walking away from her for good. I waited until I knew Robert would be working late and asked my mom if we could talk, just the two of us. I told her how I felt, how it hurt that she was siding with him, how I felt like I was being pushed out of the only home I'd ever known. I said I understood Robert was her husband, but I was her son, and I thought that should still count for something. I asked her if she really thought it was fair to expect me to move out when I was still in school, still trying to get my life in order. She didn't take it well. She accused me of being manipulative, of trying to make her choose between me and her husband. She said Robert wasn't being unreasonable, and that most parents expect their kids to move out and be independent by 19. Then she said I'd had more than enough time to prepare, but instead of doing anything about it, I just sat around whining and expecting them to solve my problems. That's when she brought up my dad. She said maybe he was right, that I needed to grow up. I asked her what she meant, and she told me my dad always thought I was spoiled. That I wanted everything handed to me. And now, she said, Robert was just trying to finish what my dad started, raising me into a responsible adult. I was stunned. I reminded her that my dad left. He walked away from us. And she said, no, he didn't abandon us, he just couldn't handle the stress. That he made a choice. Right then, Robert walked through the front door. He'd gotten home early and immediately asked what was going on. My mom told him I was trying to guilt her into letting me stay longer without paying rent. And just like that, Robert jumped in and said he was tired of hearing the same old excuses. He said, we already agreed on this. You're a grown man now. And grown men don't get to live in someone else's house for free. I told him I wasn't asking to live here forever. I just needed more time to save up. He said he'd already given me plenty of time. Then he said he and my mom deserved to have their space back without a third adult in the house mooching off them. Then came the usual comparison. When I was your age, he said, I was already working full-time and supporting myself. Nobody babied me. And then he said the reason I couldn't get it together was because my parents didn't teach me how to be independent. That set me off. I told him he didn't get to talk about my parents failing me. He wasn't part of that story. He wasn't around. He showed up a few years ago and now thinks he knows everything. I told him the truth, that it felt like he was just trying to push me out so he could have my mom to himself. He smirked and said I was delusional. That this wasn't about me at all. He said, we're married adults. We don't need permission from some teenager to live our lives. Then he said I was just angry because I couldn't control my mom anymore. That now there was another adult in the house who wasn't buying into my emotional manipulation. My mom started crying again. She said she couldn't handle the constant arguing, that it was making her physically sick. She said she loved both of us, me as her son and Robert as her husband, but that she couldn't keep living in a house where we were always at each other's throats. That's when Robert dropped the hammer. He said I had 2 weeks. That was it. If I wasn't out by then, he'd start charging me $800 a month in rent, plus utilities. He knew damn well I couldn't afford that. And he said it wasn't up for debate anymore. No more talking. No more second chances. Then he looked at my mom and said, you can back me up or you can let him keep disrespecting both of us, but I'm not living like this anymore. My mom sat there for a second. Then she looked at him and agreed. She told me she thought 2 weeks was enough time to figure something out. She said this situation had gone on too long, and it was putting too much strain on their marriage. Then she said she had to support her husband, because that's what married people do for each other. And finally, she said, one day, when you're older and married, you'll understand why I had to stand by Robert in this. And I just stared at her and said, so you're really gonna throw your son out, for some guy you've only known for 5 years? When I asked my mom if she was really choosing Robert over me, she didn't even hesitate. She looked at me and said, Robert isn't just some guy. He's my husband, and he's the one who's been supporting this family ever since your father walked out and left us with nothing. She told me I was being disrespectful by acting like Robert was a stranger, when in her eyes, he had done more for me than my real dad ever did. She said I should be thankful for everything Robert had done instead of treating him like the enemy. But all I could think was, what exactly had he done for me? I told her, flat out, that all Robert ever did was make my life harder. He tried to control everything I did and acted like I was an intruder in my own home. Robert jumped in and said he had put food on the table for me for 5 years and called me the most ungrateful person he'd ever met. He said he was done wasting time and energy on someone who clearly didn't appreciate a single thing he'd done, and then he said my mom deserved better than dealing with a disrespectful stepson who couldn't even show basic gratitude to the man who saved the family from falling apart. I turned to my mom and asked her if that's really what she believed, that Robert had saved us. And without blinking, she said yes. She told me he stepped up when my dad left us with nothing. That he didn't have to take responsibility for another man's kid, but he did it anyway because he loved her. And she said the least I could do was show him some respect instead of constantly making things more difficult. That was the last straw. I called my best friend Jake and asked if I could crash at his place for a while. He talked to his parents, and they said I could stay. So I packed up my stuff and left that night. I wasn't going to sit there one more minute listening to my mom and Robert talk about me like I was just some unwanted burden. Jake's parents were amazing about it. They said I could stay as long as I needed, as long as I helped out with groceries and pitched in with chores. Honestly, it felt like a way more fair deal than whatever Robert was trying to force on me. My mom texted me a few times. She said she hoped I was safe and that she loved me, but she also said she thought this separation was for the best. According to her, maybe some distance would help everyone cool down and gain perspective. Then she added that the door was always open if I was ready to come home and apologize to Robert and try to work things out as a family. But the thing is, I don't think that's ever going to happen. Because I'm not going to apologize for not wanting to be kicked out of the house I grew up in. A few days later, Jake's mom asked me if I had any other family I could reach out to, maybe an uncle or a grandparent. That's when I told her about my dad, and how he left when I was 14. I said I didn't even know how to find him anymore, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. She told me it still might be worth trying, even if just to get some closure. Maybe he could help, or at least explain why he walked away. I didn't know how to feel about that. What if my mom had been right all along and he really did abandon us? But part of me started to wonder, what if there was more to the story? Update 2. This is going to sound insane, but my dad called me. Out of nowhere. I hadn't heard a word from him in over 5 years. I was sitting at Jake's kitchen table, doing some homework, when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. But I picked up, and this quiet voice said my name. Then he asked if it was really me. I said, "Yeah, who's this?" And then he said the words I never expected to hear, "It's your father. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I need to tell you some things. You deserve to know the truth." I nearly hung up. I thought maybe it was a scam, or some kind of sick joke. But his voice, something about it was familiar, even after all these years. He told me he knew I probably hated him. That my mom likely told me he just abandoned us. And he said he understood why I'd feel that way, because from the outside, it really did look like he just walked away without saying anything. But he said there was more to the story, way more. He said he'd been thinking about calling me for years, but he didn't know if I'd even want to talk to him or if my mom would allow it. He said he finally worked up the nerve after hearing from an old neighbor that things at home weren't going so well. That Robert was trying to force me out. I asked him how he even knew that. He said he still had friends in the neighborhood who occasionally kept him in the loop. One of them had told him what was happening, and when he heard that Robert was threatening to kick me out, he couldn't stay quiet anymore. He said he couldn't let me go on thinking he abandoned me when the truth was something completely different. Then he dropped something on me that made my stomach twist. He said the reason he left wasn't because he didn't want to be my dad anymore. It was because my mom had been having an affair with Robert for months before I even knew who he was. He told me he came home early from work one day and walked in on my mom and Robert together. In their bedroom. He confronted her, and she admitted she was in love with Robert and wanted a divorce. Then she begged him not to tell me the truth. She said it would be better for everyone if I just believed he left us because he didn't want to be a dad anymore. She wanted to protect her image and avoid being the bad guy. He said he was so heartbroken and angry at the time that he just agreed. He left quietly and let her control the narrative. He thought maybe it would be easier for me to be mad at him than to know the full truth, that my mom blew up our family. He told me he regretted that decision every single day for the past 5 years. He knew I probably saw him as the worst kind of father. But he was so blindsided by her betrayal, he wasn't thinking clearly about what was best for me. After he moved out, he relocated to another state and tried to rebuild his life. But he never stopped thinking about me. He said he planned to reach out when I turned 18, but he kept hesitating, afraid I'd shut him out. Afraid I hated him. I didn't know what to say. Everything he said went against everything my mom had ever told me. So I asked him straight up, was he telling me the truth, or just trying to rewrite the past? He told me he understood my doubt. And then he said he had proof. Emails. Texts. Screenshots from that time. He said if I was willing to hear him out, he could show me everything. He also said that after he moved out, my mom and Robert made their relationship official almost immediately. And that they were planning to get married before the divorce papers were even finalized. And suddenly, it all clicked. The timeline. The rushed marriage. The way Robert was already around just weeks after Dad was gone. It all made sense now. Looking back, I'd always felt something was off about how quickly my mom moved on from my dad. She barely seemed upset. Most people would be crushed if their husband walked out, but not her. She bounced back like nothing happened. Now I finally understood why. She wasn't devastated because she already had Robert. She didn't need time to grieve because she'd already replaced my dad long before he even left. I used to think Robert was some kind of savior who swooped in to help my mom rebuild after my dad bailed on us. But now I realized he wasn't a rescuer at all. He was the one who wrecked everything in the first place. He was the reason our family fell apart. I asked my dad why he didn't try to fight for custody or even ask for visitation. Why he didn't try to stay in my life at all. And what he told me, man, it broke something in me. He said when he confronted my mom about the affair, she threatened to make things ugly. She said if he tried to go for custody, she'd take it to court and claim he was abusive. She told him she'd make sure I hated him, even if the court granted visitation. He said he was scared I'd be the one to suffer most from a messy custody battle. According to him, my mom convinced him that the best thing for me was to just back off. She told him I'd be better off in a stable home with her and Robert, instead of being stuck in the middle of two parents at war. He said he actually believed her. That if he just stepped aside, maybe I'd be happy. But now, after everything that happened, he knew he made a huge mistake. He told me he'd been keeping an eye on me from afar through my social media. And he could tell I wasn't happy. And once he heard through the grapevine that Robert was trying to force me out of the house, it all clicked. The plan to stay quiet and do what was best for me had completely backfired. He said it was clear that Robert never actually wanted me around. That he had just tolerated me long enough to make my mom happy until I was old enough to be shoved out. Then he said something I'd been hoping to hear for years, that he missed me. That he wanted to see me again. He said he'd been dreaming of this day, and even though he knew it would take time to rebuild trust, he was ready to do whatever it took. He said leaving me was the biggest regret of his life. I told him I was currently living at my friend Jake's house because my mom and Robert had basically kicked me out. And he was furious. He said he couldn't believe she was letting Robert, the guy she cheated with, toss her own son out like trash. He said she was supposed to protect me, not stand there while her affair partner pushed me out of the house I grew up in. Then he gave me his Facebook, phone number, and address. Told me to save them and call anytime, no pressure. He said if I ever wanted to visit or even stay with him, he had a house with a spare room, and he'd be more than happy to help me with college and getting on my feet. He said he knew he had a lot to make up for, but he was finally ready to step up and be the father I deserved. I'm still reeling from all of it. My entire childhood was built on a lie. For years, I believed my dad walked out on us. I thought Robert was the one who came in and helped fix things. But now I know that my mom had been lying to me, protecting Robert and covering up the truth for 5 years. Jake's parents were incredibly supportive. When I told them what happened, they weren't even surprised. They said it made a lot more sense now, why my mom had always seemed a little cold and why Robert treated me like some unwanted guest. They said it sounded like my mom had been manipulating me to hide her own guilt. They told me maybe I should give my dad a chance. At the very least, he deserved to tell his side of the story. And maybe, just maybe, he could help me figure out what to do next. I think they're right, so I called him back. We agreed to meet. Final update. 2 weeks ago, I met up with my dad in person. We spent the whole day together. We talked about everything, what happened back then, what I've gone through since, all the years we lost. It was emotional, heavy, but real. And the regret on his face? It wasn't fake. You could tell it ate him alive every single day. Then he showed me the proof he promised. And it hit harder than I thought it would. He had screenshots of text messages, conversations between my mom and Robert from before my dad even left. In one of them, my mom was telling Robert she loved him and couldn't wait to start their new life together. Another one was from right after my dad moved out, my mom saying how relieved she was that they didn't have to sneak around anymore. There were messages about how they needed to be careful not to get caught, how they were trying to figure out the best way to handle the transition. And then there was this one text from Robert that sent a chill down my spine. He told my mom he wasn't sure he wanted to take on the responsibility of raising another man's kid. My mom responded that I was a good kid and that I wouldn't be a problem. She said eventually, I'd see Robert as my real father. Reading that, I just sat there in silence. They had it all planned. My entire reality had been scripted behind my back, while I was just a 14-year-old trying to understand why his dad was suddenly gone. It made everything make sense. Why Robert never really accepted me. Why he was so quick to act like I was just extra baggage. He had never wanted me around. Not then. Not now. He was just pretending for her. My dad apologized over and over again for leaving me behind. He said he should have fought harder. He admitted he screwed up, and that no explanation could undo the pain, but he wanted me to know the truth. And then, he told me something else my mom had lied about. He had been paying child support. 4 years. Every month. Over $40,000 in total. And I had no idea. Because my mom told me he didn't send a single cent. He showed me bank records, payment confirmations, everything. She'd been cashing the checks and using the money without ever telling me where it came from. While all this time, she let me believe he was a deadbeat who left me with nothing. I was stunned, hurt, angry, but honestly, mostly relieved. Because now I finally know. My dad didn't abandon me. My mom lied to me. Robert replaced my dad through betrayal, not love. And the life I thought I knew? It wasn't what it seemed. I don't know where things go from here. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive my mom for what she did or the way she let Robert treat me. But I do know this, I finally have the truth. And now I finally have my dad back. And that's a start. All that time I thought he'd abandoned us, my dad had actually been trying to stay connected. He told me he'd asked my mom more than once if he could send me birthday or Christmas presents directly. But she always shut it down. She told him it would confuse me, that it was better if I believed the gifts came from her and Robert so I could have some normal family experience. Then he dropped another bomb on me, something I didn't see coming at all. 3 years ago, when his father passed away, my dad inherited a pretty large trust fund. He said it was around $300,000, and he'd been holding onto it, planning to use it to help me with college and my future. He told me that once I turned 18, he wanted to finally step in, not just emotionally, but financially too. He'd already spoken to a lawyer about setting up an education fund and putting some money aside to help me get started in life. He said he wanted to buy me a car, help me get my own place, whatever I needed. He admitted money couldn't make up for all the years he missed, but he was determined to make sure I never had to struggle while building my future. To say I was stunned is an understatement. I'd been stressing so hard about how I was going to afford college or even basic living expenses, and now my dad was telling me that I wouldn't have to worry anymore. He said the paperwork was already in progress and that soon, I'd have access to funds to cover tuition, rent, and other essentials. I couldn't believe it. I felt like I needed to share the good news with someone, so I told Jake's parents. They'd been so kind and generous to me, and I wanted them to know that I'd soon be able to help out more. Jake's mom was genuinely happy for me, but she also gave me a warning. She said to be careful who I shared the information with, because money changes how people treat you. She was right. Somehow, word about the trust fund got back to my mom and Robert. I think Jake probably mentioned it to someone at college, not realizing how fast things spread. I don't blame him, he was just excited for me. Anyway, not long after, my mom called me for the first time since I moved out. Suddenly she was all warm and loving, asking how I was doing, telling me she missed me, and saying she wanted to make things right. She said she'd been thinking a lot about our last conversation and admitted maybe Robert had been too harsh with the whole move out by your birthday ultimatum. She said she didn't want our family torn apart over what she now called a simple disagreement about house rules. She told me she loved me and wanted to talk, just sit down, all of us, and figure out how to move forward as a family. I asked her, what changed? And she said she'd been talking to friends and relatives who made her realize that maybe kicking your kid out was extreme. That there had to be a better way. Then, of course, Robert got on the phone. This was the same man who had called me an ungrateful brat just a month ago. Now he was suddenly apologizing, saying he'd been under a lot of stress at work and had taken it out on me unfairly. He said maybe he'd expected too much too soon. And now he was willing to start fresh, to try again and build a better relationship. He said I could move back home, no rent, no timeline, no pressure. Just, come home. My mom chimed in again, saying how quiet and sad the house had been without me. How much she missed seeing me every day. She said Robert had been feeling guilty and that they both just wanted to fix things. She told me family was what mattered most and that she didn't want some misunderstanding to permanently split us apart. I wish I could say it felt sincere. But it didn't. The timing was just too perfect. 1 month ago, they had no problem kicking me out. I was a burden. An inconvenience. But now that they knew I had access to money, now I was suddenly family again. It was almost laughable how transparent they were being. I could practically hear Robert thinking of ways to get close enough to ask for help with household expenses or future plans. I told my mom I'd think about it. But honestly, I had no intention of moving back in. I was comfortable with Jake's family, and more importantly, I felt safe. She said she understood, but she made sure to add that Jake's family wasn't really my family, and that eventually they might get tired of having me around. She told me she loved me more than anyone and that she and Robert would always be there for me. Then Robert jumped back on the line and said he'd been thinking of ways to help me plan for my future. He told me he had experience with finances and investments and would be happy to help me manage any money I might come into. Family supports each other, he said. Yeah, sure. After the call, I phoned my dad and told him everything. He wasn't surprised at all. In fact, he said, your mom's always been good at manipulating people when it suits her, and I'd bet money it was Robert's idea to call you now. He told me they were probably hoping to get me back under their roof so they could slowly start asking for financial help, maybe even get access to the trust fund if I was careless. He warned me to be careful. Very careful. And you know what? I listened. I'm not moving back in with them. Their sudden concern is fake, and their motives are obvious. They were fine shoving me out when I was broke and had nowhere to go. But now that they think I have value to them, they're pretending to care. My dad has been incredible through all of this. He's helping me look for my own apartment near my college so I can finally have independence. No more relying on people who don't have my best interest at heart. He even told me he's making sure the trust fund is legally protected so that my mom and Robert can never touch a dime of it. He said he learned his lesson the hard way, and he's not letting her twist things again. Strangely, I'm grateful everything happened the way it did. If Robert hadn't tried to kick me out, I never would have seen my mom for who she really is. And if my dad hadn't reached out, I might have gone my whole life believing he just didn't care. Now I know the truth. Now I know who's really in my corner and who never was. And from here on out, I get to decide who stays in my life.